Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? We're going to continue with lesson 3. And again, lesson 3 talks about a lot of different things. And so in lesson 3, what should you find in lesson 3? You'll find things like, variables. What are they? Identifiers. We talked about several some of the operators that you should know and be prepared for. We're going to talk about additional operators today as well. And we talked about data types and the various data types that exist and that are recognized in the Java programming language. I do want to make this this announcement too. If you ever want to review previous video lectures or sessions, please go to the modules page, right? And you should see the video recordings from each of our sessions. Remember, the video recordings do not replace attending class, actively attending class. All right, so I hope that you're prepared to program today because we are going to do a little programming as well today. Okay, so with that being said, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about some additional operators, some operators that you're going to read about, and then I'm going to add a few operators, though, that you will see going forward. And I want to make sure that you're ready for, you're prepared to learn about and read those concepts. So we're going to talk about several operators today. We're also going to talk about type conversion. Why and when would you use that? On Thursday's class, be prepared for coding most of the class period. We're going to summarize lesson 3 with some programming activities for sure. Okay, so let's jump right on in. Make sure you have a way to take notes, and of course, make sure your programming environment is up and ready to rock and roll. Because we will need that. So the last program that we wrote together in class, we looked at the Java file, CalculateArea.java. And so we looked at, how to declare variables here. I did not make this an interactive program, but again, we should be very comfortable reading from the keyboard and storing values in those variables. So what I'd like for us to do today to get started, let's just get started and knock off them, and jump right on in. Let's do a coding exercise here before we begin learning some new concepts. Okay, so let's take that program that we wrote last class period and let's make it interactive. Everybody good with that? They're fine. There are minor changes here. So how would we do that, you all? How will we do this? Again, I'm doing this for those that are not quite comfortable reading data from the input stream. We've got to be comfortable with using the scanner class and reading data from the keyboard, right? From the input stream, such as the keyboard. I need you to be comfortable doing this. Okay, so here, let's just write this really quick. It should not take us long because we're actually going to leave most of the code that you see there. But let's make the slight modifications and let's learn about, let's remind us how to read data from the input stream. So let's right click on our source file if you are using IntelliJ. You can, but whatever programming environment that you're using, let's create a new file. Let's call this file calculate area inputs. Input. Let's just say that. Calculate area input. Okay, that's the name of our file. You can just push enter on the keyboard. It's going to create that for us as you see it in our file tree. And it's located in the source folder. All right, so there's our calculate area input.java file. So let's go ahead and do the following, you all. I'm going to just copy and paste the program that we wrote last class period. So I hope you were writing the program that we wrote last class period, or you're gonna need to catch up. All right, so my expectation is that you wrote this program that we did together in class. That is my expectation. So this is not an observation class. This is a learn by doing class. So that's my assumption, is that you've written that program that we wrote. I'm going to highlight this and just copy over it. And we're going to make sure we change the class name to input. Okay, so all I'm doing is just copying the same program we wrote last class period, but we changed the class name. Don't forget to change the class name or you're going to get an error. It needs to be, the class name needs to be the same as the file name, but without the .java extension. Okay, so with that being said, I do not want to hard code the radius. So I am going to take this out that you see right here. Do you see that? I'm taking it out where we initialize the radius. I don't want to do it that way. Okay, so that's one change that I'm making. So in order to be, let's just go back up here. So right before our public class, I'm going to push enter a couple times, right? And again, I'm doing this we got to get comfortable reading data from the input stream. So what do we do? Because this is the interactive program, we need to import the scanner class. So I'm going to say import. This is my comment, scanner class. Okay, for interactive program. I'm just reminding you why we're doing this. So these things that I'm typing right now, you should be familiar with. It should not be brand new. What do we have to do? We have to say, use the keyword import, that reserved word called import. And we need to bring in the scanner class so that our compiler knows and recognizes any method or property that belongs to the scanner class. If you don't do this, you will get an error because I need to read input from the keyboard, which class, which Java pre-written class has those methods and properties that will be useful for retrieving input from some source, the scanner class. Okay, so how do we do that? We say what? Java dot util. Let me just stop right here. Again, you may see this on tests. So I need you to be mindful. I need you to be knowledgeable as it relates to this. What is util in this statement? Who is util? UITL. What is that? You read about it. You saw it in the video. What is your understanding of what util is? It's referring to a set of Java utilities. Okay. It's also called what? What is util called? It's called. Util is called what? And I'm going to put a little comment here. What is util? You might need to know this. I promise you will see this again. Util, right? But what is it? There's a special word that we use. It's not a method. You not utilize. It is a package. A package. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar at all? And I'm just talking, is this mic on? Does it sound familiar? It is a package. A Java package. Now, let me say this. You all need to know the difference between a package and a class. So look what I'm going to do here. I'm going to continue my notes. We're open the notes, please, because again, we're learning and doing at the same time. Is everybody good with this? Learning and doing at the same time. You need to know, because you need to, in this class and going forward, you're going to have to know how to read the Java documentation. So here, I'm going to add this right here. A package. So what is a class versus an object versus, and I'll say this, sorry, package versus a class versus an object. So package versus a class versus an object. You need, I cannot emphasize this enough. You need to know the difference between. So is a package and library the same thing? It's very similar. Yes, yes, yes. And so here, what we need to appreciate about a package, let's say, and I'm going to be brief here because I want us to get as much done as we can today, but package, it's considered a folder. I'm going to say it's like a folder. It's like a folder. Please remember it like that. It is like a folder. Okay, a folder that contains common Java classes. So that is like a folder, like we create folders all the time, like you see in our file tree here. Who's the folder? The folder is SRC that contains these files. So SRC is like a package to a certain extent. So Java, or when Oracle structured the library for Java, for the Java language, it created packages, which allows for us to use it. It collects and organizes Java pre-written Java classes. So what I'm going to do right now, you all, is I'm going to go real quick, and I want you to do the same real quick. Again, we're learning. Everything ties together, and I promise there's a method to my madness. There's a reason why I'm asking you, because again, in lesson 3, you're going to learn and read more about this. You've got to know how to read Java documentation. And so here in this class, I will expose you to, in the textbook will expose you to many of the some popular Java pre-written classes, but not all. So beyond this class, you'll be able to teach yourself additional ones. You'll know how to read the documentation, but this will also teach you how to read the documentation for other languages as well. So I'm going to type in scanner class in Java, or you can just type in scanner in Java. All right, so that's going to take us. I want to go to the Oracle Help Center. That's where the documentation is. Okay. And so here we've got to know how to read this document. I want to highlight, and again, I'm not going over all this because a lot of this was in the video, right, that I had you watch. But just to remind you, what do we mean by a package? Package. So a class is inside of a package, right? A package contains one or more classes. A package contains one or more classes. You might want to write that down if this helps. It contains one or more classes. That's very important, because when I look at this, so if I look at the notation that you see here, you all, whenever I look at a new class documentation, you'll always see the name of that class in bold letters, the biggest thing on the page, right? Right above it, on every class document, right, documentation, you should see the package that this class belongs to. Is everybody good with this? I'm saying this on purpose because I promise you're going to see this on your exams or going forward. You've got to know how to read documentation. My expectation is that you are familiar with how to read this stuff. So what's contained in a Java class documentation? You're going to see, you scroll on down, you're going to see a list of constructor methods, which we will talk about, and I did hint to and talk briefly about the role of constructor methods, and they are methods. If you notice, their names followed by open and close parentheses, they are methods. Could someone remind me really quickly, what is the role of a constructor method? The role of a constructor method. Put it in the chat for me, or unmute yourselves. What is the constructor method? And I'm going to put what a class is right here. I'm going to say this up front, that a class contains one or more constructor methods. Okay, what are constructor methods? That's the question. I don't hear any answers here. They are very important. So what are they? They're very important. Again, every single class, let me say this up front. Every single class, I should say that. Every class contains one or more. Every class that we run across, we're going to learn a lot of classes in this in going forward, in lesson 3 of going forward. Okay, so one of the classes that you learned about was scanner, but we're going to learn about in lesson 3 about the math class, right? The math class. We're going to learn about so many methods in lesson 4, 5, and 6. You've got to know how to read the documentation. What is the role of constructor method? I hear crickets. If nothing more, then Google it. Something. Okay, so I'm sorry, I didn't scan now. So, okay, you said that it initializes objects. Yes, it does. Constructors are new instances of a class. Very good. So what is a constructor methods? Constructor methods allow you to create a new object of that type class. So you're able to create a new object of that type class. So you, again, let me just say this: you've got to learn about the constructor method. Anytime we use the new, you always use the keyword new. So we use the keyword new. Everybody, please make note of this. If you're not familiar with the Java language, the keyword new is used to create a new object. So whenever you see that word new, and here's an example of where we use the scanner, a constructor method to create a new object. We always say the following, don't we? We always say scanner, SCNR equals new scanner, parentheses, system.in. This is how you need to not, yes, you can just type it out of memorization, but you better, more importantly, you better know what it means. You need to know what it means. So what are we doing on the right-hand side? Remember, this is the class, right? This is the object. And that equal symbol there. And then the keyword new is used to create new objects of type of whatever the new type of class, right? So it's used to create a new object of a specific class, So what am I doing here? You see on the right-hand side of my assignment operator, I'm using the word new. So that tells me and that's no matter the language, even in C++ and other languages, whenever we use that keyword new, that means you're about to create a new object of that type class. And so who's the class here? So what's on this right-hand side that I'm using? This is my constructor method right here. This is the constructor method, right? Open and close parentheses are followed behind it. So why is it considered the constructor method? Well, because the constructor method is always used when we're getting ready to create a new object of that type class. I will tell you some things another thing about the scanner object of a constructor method is that the constructor method has the same name as the class name. The constructor method has the same name as the class name. Don't you see that here? Do you see that the constructor method right here? And it is a method. Methods always are followed by open and close parentheses. You know it's a method. That's in every language, every programming language. Whenever you see an open and close parentheses after the name, you know you're dealing with a method. So what do we know here? Is that this method is a constructor method. Why? Because it has the same name as the class name. Who's the class name? The class name is right here. Class name is scanner. And so what is this constructor method name? Scanner. And then what am I using in the side of the parentheses? I'm telling the scanner, I'm telling the computer what type of object I'm creating. I'm creating an object that's receiving input from the keyboard, from the input stream. And you'll see that there are several methods here on the documentation that are constructor methods. And so we're using actually one of these constructor methods, right? Where we're telling what the source is, right? What the source is. So it's input stream source. So that's what this is telling the method. System is our input, is the input stream. And we want the source as .in, telling it we want from the keyboard. Okay, so here we're telling the computer grab it from the keyboard. Okay, right here in the parentheses. So this allows me to create a new object called scanner. So then what is an object really quick here? An object, right? So we know that did I talk about there? Let's talk about a class in greater detail too, because we talked briefly. But what is a class? A class is what? package is contained in a class, right? So a class is contained in a package, Java package, right? We know that to be for sure. Okay. And so what else do we know? We know that a class is like a blueprint. So it's like a blueprint. It's like a blueprint. Please, and I emphasize this in your video. It's like a blueprint that which is a representation, which is a representation of an or and when I say representation, that's like saying a model of an object. So what do I mean by that? Let me just say this. It's like analogy of building a house, you all. And I made this in the video. Again, I'm re-emphasizing these concepts. But think of me when I built my house, you all. The builder came and they asked me, "What do you want?" You know, and I told them how many bedrooms. I told them the specifications of the house that I wanted to build, and he presented several blueprints in front of me, and I had to select a blueprint. So I selected a blueprint. So imagine this, that blueprint, you all, is a representation of the house that will eventually be built. Does everybody agree with me? Thumbs up if you agree with me that a blueprint represents the house. It is not the house that I move in. Right? It's a representation, a model. That is what a class is, you all. It has all of the specifications. 2 bedrooms. Here's the bedroom over here. The bedroom's over here. The garage is going to be right here. Here's where your kitchen is going to be. Here's where your, so you can see the schematic layout of where everything is, right? So this is all of the specification, all of what this house has to offer. Does everybody understand that? All this house has to offer a model representation of, and so when I think of it in terms of a model, then you all let's make this very clear about a class. A class, and I'm going quite in depth because we're going to learn so many classes and how to create objects going forward. So I need you to know the difference between what a class is and what an object is. That's why the class title is written the way it is. The class title says problem solving using object-oriented programming, right? Object-oriented programming. These are the significant concepts in object-oriented programming. Is the difference between a package, a class, and an object. You've got to get a good understanding of what they are and how to use them. So a class, you all, contains all of the specification of which includes a specification which include methods and properties. So think of it, remember I told you my blueprint had all of the specification, the bedrooms and where they were with respect to each other, the kitchen, the bathrooms, the garage, all the end, living room, all those, right, where they are with respect to each other, the dimensions of them, all of the specification. That is what a class contains. All of the specification. So what I mean by specification, that means it lists all of the methods that you have access to if you want to use this class, and all of the properties. Will you ever use all of them? Probably not. Probably never. But again, all of the methods are listed that you have access to. All of the properties are listed that you have access to. Let me show you that if you don't believe me. If I scan the documentation, remember all of the constructor methods are listed here in the documentation. Here are all of the methods that you have access to. How do you read this? Let me show you this because we're going to look at a lot of documentation throughout the semester. On the left-hand side, you're going to see all of the data types, and the modifiers are going to be listed on the left-hand side. We'll talk about what a modifier is a little bit later. But yeah, these are the types, meaning if I use this method is going to give me back these data types. These are the return types. If you use this method, it's going to give you back this. So for instance, if I scroll down to methods that you should be somewhat familiar with, like, for instance, the next method, next int. We've used that a lot. We used it last class period, or not the class period before that. Next int is a method that we have access to. And you see that here's the documentation. There's a next int method. And if we want to use it, it's going to read the next int from the keyboard. And if you use this method, it's going to give you back an integer. It's going to return the integer that the user typed in from the keyboard. That's what this represents. The return type is going to be an integer. For instance, if you use next double right here, next double, you see that it's going to give you what? If you use it, it's going to return to you a double. Again, will we use most of these methods? No, but a handful of them we will, which you've been introduced to. Okay. But you got to know how to read documentation. Scroll up really quick and then moving on from this discussion. If you see that, I showed you that this was a scanner class. I'm just showing you for this example, but this is exactly how all of the Java pre-written classes, this is what they look like. They're organized and they do this intentionally. The Oracle does this intentionally with respect to its Java documentation. The class is always written in big letters, and the package that it belongs to, which you have to know, is above the class name. And so what I could do, you all, if I do this, I can go to, if you click the package right here, the package, you see the link, we're looking at the class itself, but I'm going to click the package link there, and you'll see here are all of the classes that belong to this package called util. Remember, util is nothing more than a folder that contains common classes. Okay, so if I scroll here, down here are the classes that are also in the java.util package. You can scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, and you'll see scanner belongs to this package along with other classes. Are we good with this? I don't want to bore you, but you got to know this stuff. So with that being said, watch what I'm going to say here. I'm going to go back to my writing here, and I'm not going to go too much into objects. But what is an object? An object is like the house in the analogy. It's like the house in the analogy. It is created from a Java class, right? And it's an instance. It's an instance, all right, of a Java class. Okay, it's an instance of a Java class. An instance of. So when I say, so and here I can also use that this word down here. I mean, this statement that I wrote above is that the keyword new is always used to create new objects. Okay, new objects. So that again, you see that again. So let me just go back real quick for my analogy. So that blueprint, remember that blueprint that I talk about in the analogy, that blueprint shows everything, right? Well, when we talk about an object, let me just, and I use this analogy in the video, but the object, you all, is like, if you've ever been in a neighborhood where you've seen houses that look alike, is everybody with me on here? Houses that you can tell they use the same blueprint. Houses that you can tell they use the same blueprint. Well, that's what an object is. An object is an instance of a blueprint. My house, if some other homeowner chose the same blueprint as mine in this neighborhood, guess what? Then my house is an instance of that blueprint, and their house is an instance of that same blueprint. So what does that tell you? It's that a class can a class can be how do I say this? Objects. A class can consist of or can represent. Let's say that a class can represent one or more objects. Let's put that up here in our statement here. Okay, hold on. So a class can represent one or more objects. Okay, can be represented by more. I'll say that a class can be represented by one or more objects. Okay, so please, 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 instances. Whenever you hear me say the word object, please automatically know that I mean instance. It means the same thing. Whenever you hear that come out of my mouth, an object is an instance. An instance of who? An instance of a class. So this means, so when it's an instance of a class, it's an instance of a Java class, I'm going to put add on this, which means, this is very important right here, which means that the object has access to, and I'm going to put this in all caps, access to all of the methods and properties owned by or contained, let's say that, contained in the Java class. I cannot say that enough. And let me just say, here's an example. When I say access, you all, I'm gonna put in parentheses right here, the dot, that dot. That is what we mean by access. Whenever you use that word, that dot symbol, that dot means access. So whenever we say the following, here's an example of this where we've used the following, where if I have this, let's say I've done this, then I can say later in my program, I can say scnr dot next int, and that will work. Is everybody with me? Of course, I have a variable on the side, right? Some variable on this side, right, in the assignment operator. But this side is what I'm referring to. Here's where I'm using my access operator. I'm using the access operator, and that's what it's called. That dot is called the access operator. I'm accessing that method. I'm telling that method called nextInt to execute. So here I'm using the access operator to tell the method that belongs to the scanner class, that belongs to the scanner class to execute. That's what that dot means. It's telling that method that follows the dot to execute. So dot will always go in front of a method, or that dot will go in front of a property. Do y'all hear what I just said? That access operator is always in, because did I not say this in your, let me just say, if I scroll up here, what did I tell you that a class contains? A class contains methods and properties. So methods, I'm going to put this right here in parentheses, methods and properties. Properties do not have open and close parentheses after it. Methods do. Okay? Put in the chat really quick a method that you've used before. I'm sorry, a property that we've used before in our programs. You see it on this page. What is the property that we're using? Properties don't have open and close parentheses. Are you all with me today, or am I just by myself? The in, yes, in. In is a property right here. We're using the in property. How do I know it's a property? It does not contain open and close parentheses. Remember, I told you that dot operator always goes in front of a property or a method that belongs to some class. Is everybody good with this? I want to empower you all. This not only applies to Java, this applies to other languages. That's my role, you all, is to teach you how to not just learn Java. That's not, I mean, because Java can be replaced in another month or two or a year, right, with some other language. Or you may go to a company that, because you say you know Java on your resume, they say, well, it'll be easy for her or him to learn a new language, because they know, one, you can learn another. Why? Because you've learned the foundation. You have learned the basic foundations of some language, right? Foundational concepts of some language. And so the dot operator, the access operator, is known across most languages. Okay, so you need to know how to use it and what it's used for. All right, all right. I deviated. Let's go back to our program really quick. Again, all of these things are important. So in order for me to bring in the scanner class, I've got to import the util package. And the util package, you can specify from the util package that you want all, that's what that asterisk means, all of the classes, their documentation brought in. You can do that. It's not, it's not going to mess up anything if you just said asterisk here. But we specifically know that we want the scanner class only, right? So you can double click there or type it, and that's what we want, right? Okay, so we have that program. That in our program, we imported our java.util.scanner class. Why? Because we need to have well, first of all, we need to create a new object of type scanner so that object can call the specific methods that it needs from the scanner class. Well, that was a mouthful. I know it was. So if you need me to repeat it, just let me know. Okay. If I don't see any repeat statements or hands up, then I'm assuming that you're with me. Okay, because I'm monitoring the chat and I'm monitoring your faces and names. Okay, so there we go. All right, so here's my class called Calculate Area Input. We're just modifying it really quickly, and then we're going to move on. So here I have declared various methods. I've created my constant variable here. Now, what we need to do now, because this is the interactive program, is we need to do what? We need to create a scanner object, which means a object which is of type scanner. Why do we do that? Certain classes you've got to do that with. In order to access these methods, we have to create a new object. We'll talk about how to know when to do it and when not to. We'll talk about that going forward on when you need to create new objects and when you don't have to. So we'll talk about it because there is a in the documentation we can see which methods or properties will need an object created. There's a way to recognize that. All right, so here, let's go ahead and create our scanner object really quickly. We know what that is. I'm just going to use the same naming convention that your textbook uses, but please be mindful. Again, I cannot emphasize enough. And if I have to, let me do this. Let me just change this. Just for the sake of it, I'm just going to call it keyboard. And again, I'm doing this on purpose just for this example, because I know you're going to see in your textbook use SCNR, but I want you to we need to think beyond your textbook, is that I want you to be comfortable that the object names that you come up with are user defined. Your textbook just chose to name it SCNR just for consistency purposes. But I want you to appreciate that whatever name you give your object, that it's up to you. It's up to you. You just have to be consistent. And so what needs to be after the assignment operator? We use that keyword new, that reserved word new. Why? Because we're creating a new object. So here, the beauty of this is, guess what? It comes up on, if you're using an integrated development environment, you're going to get some examples. So we know we're going to be needing to use the scanner constructor method. Remember, constructor methods, you all help you create new objects. So anytime we're creating a new object, right, we have to use the constructor method for that class that has the same name as the class name. That method has the same name as the class name. What do we want this scanner constructor method to create? An object that will accept input from the keyboard. So that is why we say system.in using the property in, which means input, right? Input string. Just like system.out, out is a property that belongs to the system class. And what is the out telling the computer? It's telling it to output whatever data to the console or to the outputs using the output string. Okay, so here I'm creating this new object. You notice that it's the same way that we create primitive data types. I would say int and then my variable name following. Remember, I told you that classes can also be data types. We learned primitive data types like int, double, float. Those are primitive data types, but classes are also considered to be a type. So keyboard is of type scanner, just like we said up here. Double and area, what are we doing? We're declaring a new object of type scanner. Here we were declaring a variable called area of type double. What's the difference? One is the data type here is a primitive data type, and this is a class that's considered the data type. Okay, so here again, I don't ever want you just to memorize stuff. I want you to learn this stuff. If you don't know anything about it, Dr. Chapman, that's one thing, is not memorization, but I want you to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. So here, what are we going to do next? Now that we have that scanner object, we need to ask the user. So here we're going to prompt the user really quick. Prompt user for we're going to prompt the user for radius, and then we're going to read radius. Okay, let's do that really quick, and then we're done with this example. So let's prompt the user. So system.out.print. I'm just going to simply ask the user, what is the radius? Okay, in the space. Don't forget your semicolon. And then we ask the user for the radius. We've got to be able to grab it from the keyboard and store that in some variable. So that means we've got to use a scanner object to do that. So here, what are we going to, we have a variable called radius already declared up top. We're going to give it a value, right? So that means we're going to need that assignment operator. What's going to be on the right-hand side of our operator? Put it in chat really quickly for me. How do what do I need to say on the right-hand side in order to grab from the keyboard the value that the user typed in and store that into radius? What's on the right-hand side of this assignment operator? Before I type anything, I need this is not yeah. Okay, very good, Morgan, very good. Yes, yes. Okay, so we have to use the keyboard. Keyboard is the object name that I gave. If we're using it in our textbook, it will be SCNR. Does everybody with me on that? Okay, so I'm going to say keyboard dot. If I say keyboard dot, look what happens. It populates all of the methods that the scanner object called keyboard has access to. My scanner object is scanner input, whatever the name is, whatever your name. Very good, Anthony. Whatever the name you gave it, it's user defined as long as you're consistent. And why do I need the next double? Because I'm reading the radius from the keyboard, and I declare radius as a double. You've got to select the right method from the scanner class when you're storing values into variables, right? All right, so look, that is going to give us the radius, and now we're ready to compute and we're ready to print. All those statements stay the exact same. And so let's go and run this program and let's see what we get here. So we run this program and ask, what is the radius? So what am I going to do? Type in any values you'd like. I'm going to say 2.3, and it says where the radius is 2.3, the area is this. We'll talk about next class period how to, if we wanted to specify or specify, if your program asks you to only include maybe the only 3 digits after the decimal place in your output. We're going to talk about how to format output. We'll do that on Thursday's class. Okay. All right. So with that being said, any questions for this example? Questions for this example? All right. If there are no questions, let's go back to our notes. Okay, our notes. We're going to follow along, and you can follow along with our lecture notes. I'm going from lesson 3. I'm sorry, lesson 3, PowerPoint 3 is where I am on right now. Okay. And I broke it up into 3, so you can always find these, of course, on your modules page. And so this is the third PowerPoint, okay? And so in this one, and your textbook we'll discuss some of these as well, but I want to introduce you to what we call compound operators. Compound operators, we'll talk about how to use them and so forth. So what are compound operators? Or what we call, or they're also called augmented operators as well. Augmented operators and compound operators are very useful. They allow us to shorten our statements. Let's see here. So let me add these to my notes real quick here. If you would, please bear with me. Okay, I'm going to do that. So let's add this to our notes. So what are we talking about next? We're going to be talking about compound operators. All right, so here, let's say here, and so compound operators, what are they? So here's our next topic, compound operators. Compound or augmented operators. And so when we say compound operators, what exactly are we referring to? You can see in examples of this that fall under this are the plus equal, right? Plus equal is one, minus equal is one, asterisk equal. Very simple, easy idea to understand here, and even modulus equal. So these are all compound, and they're used to simplify statements. When are, let's say here, when are compound operators used? They're used to simplify statements. So when we want to, when we want to update, when the current value of a variable is updated or modified. So when we're trying to update or modify a variable's value in memory, we use this compound operator. So you can see some examples of this. So you may never use the compound operator, but somebody may, or you may see it in one of your exams. You need to know how they work. It means the same thing. So for instance, if I say the following, here, let's say we have the following. If I say num1 equals num1 plus 5. If I say this, do y'all know what this means? Tell me what this means. If I say num1 equals num1 plus 5, let's assume that I have the following. Let's assume num1 equals 2. Okay, let's assume num1 equals 2. So what are we doing in memory? In memory, what are we doing? I mean, when the computer executes this statement, it's going to do what? It's going to go fetch the current value of num1, which is 2, right? It's going to fetch that value, which is 2. And it's going to add 5 to it to equal 7. And then what am I doing ultimately? Then I'm assigning 7 to the value to that variable in memory, right? I'm updating, I'm overwriting that num1's value. So now num1 is no longer 2, it is now 7. Does everybody see what I just did? So we're updating a variable's value using its current value. Using its current value. So using its current value is where you see right here. I'm using the current value of num1 and I'm adding 5 to it. And the result of that is what I'm updating num1 to. I'm overwriting. So when you have this scenario, you can simplify this statement. So a simplified way to write this statement. I can type today. Simplified way to write this statement is to use simplified version is to use our compound, right? Compound, and we would simply rewrite that to say num1 equals what? I'm sorry, num1 plus equal. No, that should be num1. Num1 plus equal 7. I'm sorry, plus equal what? 5. I'm sorry, 5. This means the same thing as saying this. These are equivalent statements. So these are the equivalent statements. I'm just going to copy that. I'm just going to say this. This is the same way to say this. Okay, equivalent to. They mean the same thing. So if you look back at our example here, you can see that we can do the same for subtraction. We can do the same for multiplication. We can do the same for division as well as modulus. They mean the same thing. Is everybody good with this? These are also called assignment operators. So there's compound operators, assignment operators, they all mean the same thing, or assignment operators. They mean the same thing. Compound, augmented, assignment operators. Okay. Questions or concerns about this operator and how it works? So everybody see why it's a short, condensed version of the same statement? The key is you can only use it when you're trying to update a current variables using you're trying to update a variable using its current value. Its current value. Okay. That is when you can use the augmented operator. If there are no other questions, we can look at our next operators. Our next operators are what we call increment, decrement. Let's talk about the increment and decrement operators. Okay. The increment, decrement operators are fairly easy to remember as well. And so what you need to remember here is that whenever we think of increment, everybody, we're thinking of the plus symbol, okay? Plus, and I should say, well, whenever we think of increment, we're thinking of adding one is what I should say, okay? Adding one. Decrement, whenever we think of decrement and use the decrement operator, which we'll talk about, we'll look at what the operator looks like in just a second. You're using you're telling the computer to subtract one. So increment means only by one. Decrement means subtract only by one. Okay, very important. So there are two types of increment, decrements that we can use. And so if I talk about the symbols, let's talk about our symbols here. Symbols. The symbols that you need to be mindful of when we talk about increment, decrement is the plus symbol, right? The plus symbol is one, and the minus symbol is the other. So plus, of course, means increment, right? Increment. I'll just put them side by side. And decrement is minus. Those are the symbols that represent increment and decrement. All right. And what kinds of increment and decrement can we perform? We can perform the increment. Let's talk about increment first. We can perform what we call the pre-increment. And then we're going to talk about post-increment. Well, so when we talk about pre and post, pre means where is that symbol located with respect to the variable. So when I say increment, pre or post, it means where is that symbol located with respect to the variable. If the symbol is in front of the variable, then it's considered to be pre-increment. If the symbol resides behind the variable, then we're talking about post. And that's for increment or decrement. If either one of those symbols, plus or minus is in front of the variable, then it is considered to be pre. And so let me give you an example of each, and then we're going to move on and get out of here because we are almost out of time. Yeah, so we're going to talk about, let's do here. So int, if I have the following, int num1 equals, let's say if I say it was equal to 15, okay? And I have int num2. All right, so what if I did the following? What if I said num2 equals plus num1, and I said plus, say 10, something like that, okay? And don't worry about we'll talk about the class reflection. I'm going to move class reflection to Thursday, along with some, you may have 2 class reflections on Thursday, just FYI. I'm just saying, we'll see. But here, what if I have this following statement, you all? I need you to appreciate this because you're going to see this again very soon. So how does the computer, when it deals with, so first of all, what do we know we're dealing with? We know that we're dealing with pre what? Pre-increment. So this is an example of pre-increment. So example here. I'm going to say this is an example of pre-increment. Okay, this is an example of pre-increment. And how do I know that? The symbol is in front of the variable. The plus symbol is in front of the variable. So I know I'm incrementing and I know it's pre. because it's in front of the variable. So what is this? I want you to appreciate how the computer executes this statement. It's very different than how the computer would execute a post increment. So let me just show you the difference. When the computer gets to this statement, it's automatically going to jump over to the right-hand side of the assignment operator and figure things out. What is it going to do? Immediately. So execution, this is the order of execution right here. The first thing it's going to execute is this statement right here. It's going to go to memory, fetch the current value in memory for num1, which happens to be 15. It's going to add 1 to it immediately. It's going to not only is it going to add 1 to memory, add 1 to num1, but it's going to change that value in memory. So it goes and updates memory. So plus and minus, it goes and updates memory. So now in memory, what has happened? I'm going to just below here, I'm going to talk about briefly the order of operation, right, of execution. The order of execution, the first thing that's going to take place is that it's going to address this num1, right? Plus num1 by doing what? It's going to add 1 to memory, no, 1 to num1. Add 1 to num1. Now num1 is 16 in memory. Okay. All right, please make note of that. So the next thing it then does, now that I've updated num1's value in memory, what am I then? Then I'm ready to address this other side. Then the computer goes over here and adds 10 to that, which gives us what? So that's the next thing that executes. Is the second thing is it says num plus num1's value. We add finally 15 to that. And that gives us what? That gives us our what? 26. Is that right, everybody? We're adding 10 to our 16. So that's 26. Is everybody good with that? Thumbs up if you're good. Okay. Because we're taking 16, we're ultimately saying, what are we ultimately saying? 16 plus 10, that gives us 26. Okay, so now 16 is stored in, 26 now is the value, the result of calculating the right-hand side of our assignment operator. Now we're ready. Finally, remember the last thing when we talk about order of operation, the last operator to execute is the assignment operator, the equal. That's the last operator. It has the least precedence. It will execute last, always. So therefore, that's the last thing that's going to execute on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, right? After I calculate the right-hand side, then I store that value in memory for the variable on the left-hand side. So now what we know that num2 has what stored in it, has 26 stored in it. This is an example of, you all, of pre-increment. Before we leave today, I'm going to go over post-increment, everyone. Okay, post-increment. What is the difference between post? And we know that post increment, here's an example of post increment. So what does this example look like here? Let's assume we have something similar. Num1, let's assign it perhaps to 15 as well for the sake of it. And let's go ahead and declare another variable called num2. And then if I do the following, if I say num2 equals num1 plus, let's say plus, or we'll do this, subtract 5. Okay, something like this. So this is post increment. How do I know it's post? Because the symbols are behind the variable name. So what's going to take place? Go back down here. I'm just going to, here's my order of operation again. So order of execution. So what happens first? We know that here's what happens first. So we're going to immediately come here. Now, this is whenever you see a post, everybody, I want you to appreciate this is different than pre. Please pay attention to what I'm about to say. I know we're about out of time, but I want you to appreciate how post works. It's very different. Post, you want to almost ignore, like I'm going to put my hand over the plus symbol that follows the variable name num1. Almost you ignore it. You initially ignore that post increment. And what am I going to do? The computer's going to fetch the current value of num1 in memory. Okay, it's going to fetch the current value of num1 that's currently stored in memory for num1, which is 15. 15. So let's go ahead and let's do this. It's going to fetch the current value. So this takes place first. It's going to, what is it going to do? So number one, it's going to say, so here I have num1, I'll say plus. And so what is it going to do here? It's going to then take the current value. It's going to use, I'm sorry, that's num1. It's going to say num1. It's going to actually go through this whole thing. It's going to say this. Right? It's going to go through the whole thing. It's going to say, it's going to use current value of num1 and subtract 5. Right? Subtract 5. And so and ultimately, what are we saying? We're saying 15. So we're saying 15 minus a 5, right? Which equals 10. So that is what we're going to end up with after this executes. So this is going to execute. It's going to take the current value of num1 and subtract 5 from it. The next thing it's going to do is it's going to come over here and store that the value that was calculated is going to be stored in memory for num2. That is the second thing that takes place. Please notice the order of things here. So num2 is now going to store what? The value 10. It now has the value 10 in it. Is everybody with me? And now what takes place after and I'm going to do this. When does this plus take place? That's the third thing that it does. Okay? The third thing that it does is finally it will address and execute that post increment. So now the now the num1 plus, right? Is finally executed. This means finally add 1 to num1 after using the current value, which we've already used the current value. So now what does that simply mean? It means now that num1 is being assigned to what do we have? 16. Now it's 16 in memory. So you do not update that variable's value until after you've used the current value. So we don't update that variable's value until that's the last thing you do on that line of code before you go to the next line of code to execute. So it's done right at the end, right before you go to the next line of code to execute the next line of code. So that's done at the very last. Does everybody see how we got this? Does anybody have a question on how we got this? So if I were to ask you this, what is the value down here? If I say, what's the result? If I say, well, the result, what if I ask you the following? If I say, what is num1 value after this executes? And what is num2's value after this statement executes? What would you say? What's the value of num1 after this? Put it in chat really quickly and then we'll get out of here. What's the last value? Everyone? The last, after this statement executes, after all of this executes, the last value of num1 is 16, you're right. And the last value of num2 is num2. In this statement, we took 5 from it, right? So it's 10, absolutely. Okay. Is everybody good? Thumbs up if you're good. Again, we'll start off we may start class, you all, just FYI, with a class reflection, and I may end Thursday's class with another class reflection. I just may. So be here on time, be ready to rock and roll. We're going to code all class period. I do have one additional concept that I'm going to go over called type conversion, and then we're going to write some code for the remainder of class on Thursday. So I look forward to seeing you. You all have a great one. I'll see you on Thursday. Take care of yourself. Hopefully you learned something today. Yes, we learned something today. All right, take care. Be safe. Bye. Have a good one. Let's stop. There we go.